What's up, guys? Welcome into today's episode. We are talking South Carolina's biggest opponent in 2024 and why it's not a team, but the history that they're up against, and also why that means the bar for success may not be as high as you think. All that right now on Locked On Gamecocks.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. It's great to have you along. I'm your host, Chris Marler. Thank you for making Locked On Gamecocks your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube or the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Get the Game Time app today. Create an account. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. But let's jump into today's episode. And what we're talking about is the 2024 biggest opponent, in my opinion, ahead of South Carolina this season. And it's not a team. It's not a player, anything like that. It's the history they're up against. And I told you guys last week, I love a deep dive. You're going to learn that about me. And I got into this weekend looking at some numbers. And for me, three things that South Carolina that really stood out for the history they're up against, specifically in this season. But also, why that may mean that the bar for success is not going to be as high as some people might think. Like we talked about this last week on the show about optimism. There's just not a ton of positive outlook from the national media. Like outside of Columbia, outside of this state, outside of people in Garnet and Black, I don't hear a lot of positive remarks and assumptions and things like that about how, the season could go pretty well. No, it's doom and gloom. They're not going to make a bowl. Beamer's going to be in the hot seat, blah, blah, blah. I don't think that's necessarily the case. Now, I will tell you the three things and three people, two players and Shane Beamer, the opponents they're up against, like I said, is history. And we'll start with Shane Beamer. Shane Beamer is going into year 4 of him being the head coach of South Carolina. It has been up and down, right? It seems that that's the way it always goes with South Carolina is the more expectations on them, the more they fall short sometimes. When they're laying in the weeds and they're able to kind of stay out of the radar or stay off the radar, I feel like those are when South Carolina has their best seasons. That being said, Shane Beamer going into year 4, you've heard the talk about him being on the hot seat. What's it going to take if he goes 5-7 again, 4-8 maybe, even though the schedule is always pretty difficult? Does that buy him another year? So I went into some of the numbers at South Carolina in general, and year 4 for head coaches at South Carolina has been pretty awful. 5 of the last 6 head coaches at South Carolina had a losing record in year 4. 5 of the last 6. That doesn't mean necessarily they were fired, but 5 of the last 6 had a losing record. 8 of the last 10 did not have a winning record in year 4 as a head coach. Now, listen, there's 2 ways to look at that, though, right? Like I don't think Shane Beamer is going to be diving into history books because he's bored on a Saturday because it's too hot to go outside in Columbia and it's 1,000 degrees. That's what I did this weekend. But I do think that Shane Beamer is probably feeling a little bit of pressure. And when you look at just the consistent weird history that is South Carolina football in year 4 of head coaches, I don't think it necessarily will impact the job that he's going to do. But what it also does is that bar of what you think success is probably not way up here, right? Like Shane Beamer, can you get to 6 wins? We don't need you to necessarily win 11, 12. It'd be great. No one's expecting that. Can you get to 6 wins? I mean, can you have another one of those type years where you may not have double-digit wins, but you're going to absolutely have one of the most memorable moments in all of college football, like you did at Tennessee a couple years ago, running out of fireworks, beating a top 5 team, ending their playoff run. Can you do that against Ole Miss? Can you do it against LSU? But overall, can you just get to 6 wins? Can you avoid any of the speed bumps or the obstacles, the upsets, and things like that? You've got a pretty favorable schedule for who comes to Columbia. Can you win the games you're supposed to win and get to 6 wins? Because I don't think if he gets 5, that everyone is going to be super negative about that. I just don't. If he gets 5 and he beats Clemson, beats an Ole Miss, beats Bama on the road, yeah, 6 wins would be great. You want to go to a bowl game. But a statement win, I think would do a lot for Shane Beamer in this program as well. Now, listen, the other two, like we talk all the time about like going into this year, there's so little production coming back at two positions. Obviously, you have to replace Spitzer Rattler at quarterback, and you also have to replace pretty much all of your receivers, right? The returning production you have at receiver, the most receptions you have from an individual player from last year's team is 12, and that's Nick Harbor. I told you guys last week, if there's one person outside of his parents that's going to bang the drum for this kid, it's me. I'm super high on Nick Harbor, like for the same reasons why everyone is super high on Nick Harbor. Just tremendous upside, incredibly physically gifted, elite athlete. Like not just a good 4-star, 5-star, blue chip type talent and recruit, like a world-class athlete. That's why, he's spending spring and part of summer trying to like train for the Olympics. That's not something a lot of people do. Just an elite world-class level athlete. So one of the reasons I'm also very high on him, and I brought this up in the show about the Optimism show last week, was sure, you don't have a lot of production. He only had 12 receptions last year. Looking back at like his season and like his game log, I believe he only had he only had 2 catches in the first 6 games. Like it took a while for him to get involved at all. But even though you only had 12 receptions last year, the one thing that I feel like South Carolina always seems to do is have a receiver that wasn't on the radar nationally in the conference or anything like that before the season. And then by the end of the season, it's either, a first-round talent like Xavier Legette, it's an all-SEC guy like Juice Wells, it's Josh Vann, it's like any of those, right? And so when I look at the production and the history of this specific situation where it's like, don't have a ton of experience. 12 catches last year, 195 yards, 1 touchdown, right? 6th on the team. But then you start looking at some of the other very notable names at South Carolina over the last decade or so at that position. And you look at the jump in production that they've had from year 1 to year 2, or just from a down year to like their breakout year, which always seems to happen. Look at Xavier Legette. Xavier Legette in 2022, 18 receptions, 167 yards, 3 touchdowns. Fast forward to 2023, 71 catches, 1,255 yards, 7 touchdowns. He had over 1,000-yard increase, over 50 more catches year over year. Go back to Josh Vann, 2020, 10 receptions, 88 yards, 1 touchdown, right? 2021, 43 catches, 679 yards, 5 touchdowns. He went from being the 8th leading receiver on the team to the 1st leading receiver on the team, the go-to guy. Deebo Samuel, 2017, 2018, a little bit different because he was battling some injuries. But you look at what he did in 2017, 15 catches, 250 yards, 3 touchdowns, right? 5th on the team. Then in 2018, they did what you're supposed to do with an elite athlete like that and got the football around him, in his hands, and as often as possible. 2018, 62 catches, 882 yards, 11 touchdowns. 8 more touchdowns than the year before, almost 50 more catches, and over 600-yard increase. It just time and time again. You look at like Pharaoh Cooper. Pharaoh Cooper had 3 catches for 54 yards in his first year, 69 catches for over 1,100 yards in the second year. The jump that Deebo Samuel's made, and this might be the best comp in general, Deebo Samuel's made from his freshman year in 2015 to his sophomore year in 2016. He had 47 more catches, 622 more yards. Like, get that kid the football. And we all know that there's not a ton of production coming back. Okay, you got bodies. You got dudes that can fill that. So, like, when I look at Nick Harbor, like, can you be that? And also I look at Dowell Loggins and say, like, can you get this man the football? Can you get him at least 7 to 8, 9, 10 targets a game? Just physical mismatch, every single part of it. And also, here's the thing. It's not limited just for Nick Harbor. Like the rest of the receiving corps too. Like, you have ample opportunity to step up and be the guy. So, like, iron sharpens iron. Competition makes everyone better. Who is going to step up and be wide receiver 1? I think it's going to be Nick Harbor. But can someone else with those similar statistics, like freshman year to sophomore year, have that breakout season that we've seen tons of South Carolina players have year over year? We have one more player I want to talk about. It's LaNorris Sellers, and just the numbers we need him to put up this year. in the history at that position for South Carolina first-year starting quarterbacks. But we will do that in the next segment. We will talk about that. And also in a very eventful weekend in recruiting, not just in football, but also in baseball. Make sure you stay tuned for that as well. But first, we get a shout out again to our good friends at Game Time app. Last week I told you guys that July 4th, one of my favorite memories, going to Fenway Park on July 4th. Wish I had Game Time app then, back in the 90s, because I wouldn't have got stuck behind a pole and I would have been able to see exactly where my seats are, all the costs up front, all of those lovely and wonderful things that you get only at Game Time app. Listen, we got games coming up in less than 2 months. We've got a lot of events around the city. If you want to venture out into this heat, have at it. Have at it. I am going to stay indoors for most of it until kickoff. But I'll tell you one thing I am very excited about, and thanks to our friends at Game Time app, it has made it a seamless wait and countdown. I'm not talking about countdown to football and countdown to kickoff. In 2 weeks, I'm going to see Creed. And you can judge me all you want. I don't care. I cannot wait to see Creed. And I also cannot wait till we get there because I don't have tickets yet. I just know we're going to Greenville. We are going to hop on the Game Time app probably right 30 minutes, an hour before, because it's the only app where the actual ticket prices go down the closer you get to the event. So I'm looking at tickets right now. Front row is like $140. If I can get that for under $100, being front row, singing nothing but vowels and 90s bangers with Creed and Scott Stapp, can't wait. Anyway, get the Game Time app today. Like I said, it makes everything so much easier. You get your all-in pricing, total cost up front. You can buy tickets in just 2 taps. Takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Use the Game Time app, create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So there you go. What's up, guys? Welcome back in segment 2 here on Locked On Gamecocks. And we are going to continue this look at the biggest opponent in 2024 for South Carolina, which is the history of the program and what they're up against going into this season. We already talked about Shane Beamer and going into year 4. We talked about Nick Harbor. We're going to get into some talk about LaNorris Sellers. But first, listen, guys, are you watching sports on Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Do you have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch over to Locked On Sports today. Free 24/7 sports streaming channels, program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. I know I'm pretty loud, but not screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, listen, so we talked about the players and the history they're up against, and the last one I want to go over is LaNorris Sellers. We talked about this last week. Somebody said, what happens if he balls out? Because I think he could be that kind of ability at quarterback where it's like, maybe he's not going to like put up 3,000 yards passing. Maybe he's not going to, be an all SEC quarterback. I don't know, but he is athletic enough and he's a good enough athlete to make plays and break the back of a defense at least once or twice during the game. You know what I mean? Like, that's one of the things that made Jaden Daniels so effective. And I'm not comparing ththose two as quarterbacks, but I will say, like, the thing that made Jaden Daniels so frustrating for defensive coordinators wasn't that how good of a passer he was or how fast he was. It was, hey, it's 3rd and 9, and not only did he just break free for a 12-yard game, it's like a 40-yard game. Like, I think that's the kind of game-breaking ability and like back-breaking, frustrating type of athlete that LaNorris Sellers can be a quarterback. But listen, so you look at him going into year 1. And what are the expectations? The expectation shouldn't be for him to ball out, especially with the production returning that we just talked about. But if you're looking at just what history tells us and the first-year starting quarterbacks, especially in his class, being a sophomore, I got numbers and numbers and numbers, okay? So you look at Steven Garcia, Perry Orth, Connor Shaw, Jake Bentley, the 2021 campaign where it was quarterback by committee and it was awful all year long. And then Dylan Thompson. You kind of take Dylan Thompson out because it doesn't really make as much sense since he was a senior. So by the time he finally got to start, he put up a really, really good season, had over 3,500 yards passing, 30 total touchdowns. But across the board, everyone else, the other 5 quarterbacks I just mentioned, who are good quarterbacks, memorable quarterbacks, you don't have to be Connor Shaw. You know what I mean? Like if you're LaNorris Sellers, like no one's expecting you to go out there and be that solid, that efficient, that good, and that much of a winner from day one. But if you could just be a little bit better than some of the other first-year starters that we've seen, because the numbers aren't that crazy, right? Like what's the bar for success here? You're talking about like with all of those quarterbacks I just mentioned, Perry Orth, Steven Garcia, Jake Bentley, the 2021 season, the average season for a first-year starting quarterback over that time for South Carolina is 59% completion percentage, 2,300 yards passing, 17 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 20 total touchdowns, 7.2 yards per attempt, 6 wins a season. I think if you ask South Carolina fans right now, that last number especially, they would take that in a heartbeat. Don't need you to go out there and be Bryce Young, Nico of Tennessee. I'm drawing a blank here. Carson Beck. Don't need you to go out there and be that. Need you to just improve on some of these very consistent numbers that we've seen from first-year starting quarterbacks in Columbia over the last decade and a half. We don't need double-digit interceptions, right? Like, can we find some more explosive plays and get that yards per attempt over 7? Because like most of the numbers, besides Connor Shaw, most of these numbers were very middle of the road in the SEC. Which, again, if that's the bar that we've had, I mean, you got to be licking your chops if you're LaNorris Sellers. Like, you can improve on that. I mean, like, in this offense, with the amount of times that they're going to throw the football, I know they have, like the run game should be much improved. I think Phil Steele had in his magazine, it will be the most improved rushing offense in the entire country. They're going to run the football, but they're also going to put it up a lot. And can he get over 200 yards per game? I think so. 60% completion percentage? Yeah. Yeah. Double-digit interceptions? Just don't throw one a game. I just feels like LaNorris Sellers, especially having 1 year in the program, and being behind a guy like Spencer Rattler, it just kind of feels like he could have, I don't know if it's going to be a breakout year, but he could be just so very efficient and a good college quarterback. I don't know if he's ever going to start in the NFL. Connor Shaw didn't. But Connor Shaw was a really, really good college quarterback. And that's what you need to hope for with LaNorris Sellers. And it starts this year. It's his first year starting. Like, no one's going to expect you to go out there and set the world on fire and complete 75% of your passes and throw over, that's not the offense. That's not what they're going to do. But can you just be better than the guys before? Because those are some pretty good names. And again, the number that matters the most isn't the yards, isn't the touchdowns, the yards per attempt, the completion. It's the wins. Get to 6 wins. We keep talking about it. We're going to keep talking about it as well. Anyway, let's move on from that. I hope you guys enjoy the deep dive. Real quick, the off-season recruiting for South Carolina, it has been very eventful this weekend. Not just in football, but also with baseball and transfer portal as well. We'll start with football since we already are there. And listen, I grew up in Atlanta. I've been covering the SEC for about a decade now. Everyone knows that Georgia is the premier program in the country right now. Kirby Smart is probably the best coach in college football. Incredible, incredible coach. I don't know what Shane Beamer did to him, but it's not a joke that he very much dislikes Shane Beamer. And that whole weird dynamic reared its ugly head this weekend as Georgia flips South Carolina's highest-ranked commit, DB Shamari Earls. He's a consensus top 100 recruit, 4-star defensive back from Virginia. He flipped to Georgia, and it was kind of expected. Like, you heard the rumblings about this for the last couple of weeks, but it doesn't make it less upsetting, less frustrating when you had 4 stars, right? You were in the top. You were 20th in the country in recruiting rankings from 247 6 days ago on Tuesday. You lose Shamari Earls. You drop from 20th to 38th on 247. It's your highest ranked recruit. You're left with 3 4-stars. And oh, by the way, your other 4-star defensive lineman from the same area in Virginia Kirby also offered him like an hour later. And Earls is already trying to flip him as well. So frustrating, but plenty of time left in this cycle. I think when you look at the recruiting, you did get a win this weekend from Beamer, which was you got a linebacker from Jaden Breaker from South Bennett High School, Region 8, 5A, former Region 8 athlete as well, guys. Good competitive football player, very good size. If you watch any of the tape, very, very good size. Like, should not be a guy that comes in and needs 2 years in the weight room. It's a 3-star, but like, we've seen what those can become, I feel like, at South Carolina. And at least you had a win, right? At least you had a win. Like the Earls thing sucked. At least you had a win. You missed out on the safety. They went to Notre Dame, but at least you got a win here. We'll do more of a deep dive on the recruiting stuff tomorrow because, of course, I got into those numbers as well. It's too early in the cycle to label it a success or a failure, but there's a certain number that I looked at that I think Beamer has to be above if he wants to have a roster that will compete at the level I think he wants to compete. But we'll get to that probably later tomorrow. Also, we talked about baseball recruiting. So South Carolina, obviously a new head coach, Paul Maneri. They got 4 Power 4 commits over the last week and a half. You get 2 guys from Clemson, Nolan Nawrocki, I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that right, Nathan Hall, Max Cover from Texas A&M, and Henry Kazmar from Ohio State. Kazmar, I think, is going to be a really good ball player, to be honest. Big Ten is probably the weakest of the then Power 5 conferences for baseball. I know Michigan played for a national championship like 5 years ago, but it's not bad competition, right? He put up good numbers, and he fills an immediate need. And so does Nolan Nawrocki from Clemson. Not an incredible year. I think he had like 264 or something like that. I think he had 7 home runs. He's playing in the Cape right now. He had 2 home runs in his first 10 games. But you look at the production that infield had from last year, and especially for an offense that was able to put up a lot of runs, like a lot of times throughout the season. But you're starting 3 infielders at second base, shortstop, and third base. They had the lowest batting average of the starting 9. They combined to hit 232, and they struck out 178 times in 578 at-bats. They struck out 31% of their combined at-bats. Listen, I played college baseball. I don't pretend to be I'm not at that level. I don't pretend to know everything nearly as much as anybody that recruits for the University of South Carolina or Paul Maneri or anything like that. But I will say, striking out 31% of the time throughout an entire season for 3 guys combined, make an adjustment, guys. Make an adjustment. Either way, glad that they got some people coming in. Should create some more competition. And you listen to what some of the quotes from Paul Maneri, he's fired up about the opportunity. And he mentions specific players as to why they, them coming back, made taking this job so much more, I guess, that's what sealed the deal. That's what sealed the deal was some of these specific players they had coming back, because otherwise it might not have been as attractive a job for them. But love what Maneri's doing already. And again, it's a long time until opening day for next year. But the recruits are bringing in, you've got a 10th ranked class in the 2025 cycle. You had a top 20 class in last year's cycle as well. Love to see it. So there is that. Listen, make sure you stay with us. That is the end of segment 2. We will close the show with some WNBA All-Star shoutouts. And also, we are going to dunk on Bleacher Report because they released their top 30 college football players of all time. And the list sucks. It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. Make sure you tune in to hear y'all's opinion on the list as well. All right, welcome back in, guys. We are going to close today's show with something I wanted to bring up last week, and I ended up being long-winded and wasn't able to do it. But just again, preaching to the choir here, but a well-rounded athletic department, not just a football school, Georgia, not where you have any sort of downtime for a sporting event. Like in South Carolina, it's one of the few places, I feel like LSU's like this as well. It's one of the few places I feel like in the country where every single season, every single sport, you have some sort of vested interest because you have a very highly competitive team, whether it's baseball, women's basketball, now with men's basketball, and obviously college football as well. You love to see it. So the WNBA announced the All-Star teams, and I didn't pay attention to more than 5 of the names, to be honest. But I will tell you, tip of the cap and another, I guess, feather in the cap for Don Staley. 2 of the top 3 vote getters in the entire league, Leah Boston and Asia Wilson, they finished 2nd and 3rd behind Caitlin Clark. Really, really awesome job from both of them. Obviously, like Asia, I don't know if she's the face of the league at this point, but she probably should be. She's the best player in the league. So there's that. Anyway, we were going to close out today's show with a little bit of fun. I don't know if it's very fun because it drove me crazy. Bleacher Report came out with a ranking. It actually was last year, but it's starting to make the rounds this year. And I want to get y'all's opinion, so make sure you comment below what you think about this. But it's the top 30 college football players of all time. Let me see if I can do this. Top 30 college football players of all time. You just start thinking about that right off the top. Herschel Walker, Bo Jackson, like Tim Tebow, it's over 150 years of history, but like spare me anybody from like the 20s and 30s. Like I don't give a blank that somebody with an alliteration nickname like Hopalong Cassidy was beating teams from like Ace Hardware in the 30s because he was playing at Notre Dame. Like that does nothing for me. I will tell you, this list also did nothing for me. All right, here's the list. Herschel Walker, Archie Griffin at 2, Tommy Frazier, Hugh Green, Barry Sanders. I would say, let's start with what's right from this list versus what's wrong. 3 through 5, love it. Like Barry Sanders continues to be like the most like overlooked Heisman winner in terms of like a single season like of greatness that we've ever seen in college football. He had almost, I think it was 3,800 total yards that season. An incredible year. We talk about Burrow and Cam and Tebow and all that kind of stuff, but like from a running back to put up those kind of numbers is insane. Tommy Frazier, I don't know how old the audience is, but like watching that guy run the option in the 90s was just beautiful. Archie Griffin, I don't want to be a hater because I understand he's the only player to win 2 Heismans. But if we're being honest, how many Heisman winners probably didn't deserve it over somebody that was behind him? I'm not saying Archie Griffin wasn't a phenomenal player. And if he's the only 2-time Heisman winner in the history of college football, yeah, you have to have him up there. But here's a fun fact for you guys. Do you know that in his second year, like his second Heisman year, when he came back and won it again, you know he only scored 4 total touchdowns, and another running back on his team was used at goal line situations and scored 25. He won the Heisman Trophy with 4 rushing touchdowns. How? All right, kind of going through the rest of it here. Tommy Nomas, Deion Sanders, Earl Campbell, OJ getting a lot of love. Don't ever love to see that. Ricky Williams, Bo Jackson at 19 is insane to me. Just insane. Orlando Pace, love that. I initially scoffed at Glenn Davis, but if you look at his numbers, that dude, just like a man amongst boys. Probably like a man amongst boys because it was like in the early 40s and everyone else is at war. But anyway, Randy Moss, Ron Dane, Charles Woodson. Then you look at the end of it, and I don't know what happened here, but it was like the last person invited to the group project decided to take over because Colt McCoy made the top 30 college football players of all time. Colt McCoy? Colt McCoy is just a wish version of right-handed Tim Tebow. He is, if Tim Tebow was right-handed and just like wore belt buckles instead of crosses. Like that's the fact that top 30 all time, it's ridiculous. No George Rogers, kind of surprising. Listen, I'm gonna tell you mine real quick here. I know that we did not end the show with some of the with anything South Carolina related, but I saw this and I had to just like it infuriated me so much, mainly because the Colt McCoy thing. But who are your top 5 to 10 college football players of all time? Would love to know. Put it in the comments, send it to me on Twitter, whatever. I'll tell you mine right now. This is the list I came up with earlier today. That's not concrete. I think the top 5 is concrete for me. Herschel Walker, Bo Jackson, Tim Tebow, Jim Brown, Derek Thomas. Derek Thomas, by the way, no one ever talks about that season he had at his senior year. He had 39 tackles for loss, 27 sacks, and like 100 tackles. I don't even know how to wrap my head around that. He returned 4 punts for touchdowns while he was playing linebacker, which is insane. Outside of that, Barry Sanders, Tommy Frazier, Cam Newton. I know he only played for 1 year, but still, Steve McNair. And then I put Darren McFadden as well. Anyway, would love to hear y'all's thoughts and opinions. We will be back tomorrow. Real quick, I know we're starting a new week. I do want to say this because I feel like it would be a mistake not to. But I know that Andrew has been running the show for a long time, and you guys got kind of stuck with someone new right in like the heart of the off season without any kind of announcement. The support from the first 2 shows, it was overwhelming and really awesome. And I just want to say thank you to you guys. And I want to reiterate this one more time. Like, we're going to be doing this every day. This is y'all's show. What do y'all want to talk about? And that's what we'll talk about. Like, there's no bad suggestions. Well, there probably are. But I want to make sure that you guys are a part of the show, enjoying the show, and all that good stuff as well. So hope everyone had a fantastic July 4th. I know a couple of you reached out. You did not lose any fingers. So very proud of you. Let's close with this. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 247 streaming channel on YouTube. And it now is also available on Amazon Fire TV, the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, guys, y'all have a great day. Stay cool. It's 1,000 degrees in Columbia. We'll see y'all tomorrow.